Hello, and welcome to the Winner Circle. I'm your host, Dr. Sean Hubbard. As you're aware, on the Winner Circle, we like to take on the health concerns of the day. Some of those are personal health concerns and some are societal. We like to talk about these health concerns and see if we can find creative solutions to addressing them. That's the whole goal. Here to help me do that today is a retired police sergeant, also known as Safety Man,
Yes.
Corey Jones. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks, Doc. I appreciate you having me.
It'll be fun. The concern I wanted to talk about is the unfortunate circumstance that happened a couple of weeks ago. Walter Wallace, a
Yes.
27-year-old gentleman. But before we get into that, I want to ask you a little bit more about your career. I know you've been pretty storied in your career. What made you go into law enforcement?
That's a good question. I originally wanted to be an astronaut. I think like all good little boys and girls want to be astronauts.
Absolutely.
But I didn't have 20/20 vision, and at that point NASA said you had to have 20/20 vision. So then I decided, I had an uncle who was a police officer in Philadelphia. My cousin was a New Jersey state trooper. I had another uncle who was a sheriff's deputy down in North Carolina. I just had really good influence. They had the best stories at the barbecues.
How about that?
And believe it or not, I actually do enjoy helping people.
Sure.
I do.
Excellent, excellent. And you have been 27 years in now. Okay. Did you start off at kind of a lower level and then kind of work your way up? I mean, you got the sergeant, so that says something.
Yeah. I started actually as a Wildwood Boardwalk cop in the summer, which was one of the most incredible times, just because you have rookie partiers from all over the East Coast coming down there with no parental supervision.
Wow.
And this was in 1991, so there was no cell phone to be able to call home or anything like that.
Right.
And there was alcohol and there was drugs and there was young partiers everywhere. So you got really, really good experience and exposure to every type of law enforcement situation in a short amount of time. We went from homicides to Halloween parties all within the same week.
Wow, how about that? So dealing with all sorts of crises. I mean, some out in public, many times some domestic.
Yes.
Lots of different scenarios playing out. Excellent. Okay. Well, I wanted to talk to you specifically about this gentleman, Mr. Wallace, because it became more of a police-oriented story, a law enforcement officer story. But it started off as a health crisis in a way. As you're aware, he's a 27-year-old gentleman, and he had a history, documented history of bipolar disorder. And it sounds like he was having a very difficult day, acting out and in a violent manner. I think that 911 had been called multiple times, and the final time law enforcement came and it didn't work out the way anybody wanted it to, I'm sure.
Correct.
Now, what's your take on the response from society, let's say? I mean, we have family that have called for a loved one who has become dangerous, and even the neighbors had called. And law enforcement had been there. What do you think would be ideal, just generally, when somebody's having, let's say, a psychotic break like this?
Well, in my experience, I've dealt with almost exactly the same situation numerous times.
Sure.
With or without a knife, with or without access to weapons, where a family member has 80% of the time they're okay, 10% of the time they're annoying to be around, then there's another 10% of the time where they're downright dangerous and they want to call. And unfortunately, I think we're kind of in a society where iPhone, microwaves, and your cable system, everything happens that fast, and people kind of want something to be done immediately and quickly and effectively.
Yes.
And law enforcement is not equipped to do that. We're equipped to keep people safe, direct people to services that can usually institute more of a longer-term solution to it. So when we get there, our job is to make the scene safe. If we can then do that, then we can hold it down until we can get people better equipped to psychologically deal with someone's mental issues.
Sure.
But if we can't make the scene safe, as what was going on with Mr. Wallace, he had already gotten into what I call the aggression mode with the knife, where he was running around a crowded street with a lot of people, putting a lot of people's lives in danger. The officers then had to separate themselves, make sure no one was in the line of fire, which is why they waited to come out in the middle of the street and had him come out in the middle of the street, so they're not shooting with the houses and children and families as backdrops to shoot him. So they had one goal at that point. You can't help other people if you're dead.
Yeah.
And you can't help the gentleman if you're injured.
Sure.
So we have to do that first. So the very first time, I think that law enforcement or the city was called, maybe a stronger approach should have been taken then. The family definitely has the ability to, in some places call them a 302, they have different names for them, to say we're sending him for a 24 to 48 hour committed for a psychiatric institution for an evaluation.
Yes.
And a lot of times people, once we get there and we're able to calm them down, I'm sorry, I'll take my medication, And then the family doesn't want to do that because then somebody has to maybe not go to work, somebody maybe has to drive their clothes up there, and there may be insurance problems, there may be a lot of other issues that are affecting that decision. And now the patient's best interest is not being taken care of.
So, hearing this 302 idea, and this happens sometimes because a person will end up in the emergency department. Sometimes law enforcement will bring a person to the emergency department, and then they have to be 302 there and committed for their own safety and the safety of others. Do you think that there was a missed opportunity perhaps there, perhaps on the family side, whoever was officially involved, in this case perhaps law enforcement?
Well, I know the one time, the second time the law enforcement was there, they interacted with him. Somehow they found out he may have been on PCP. And he just ran away. And they chose not to go chase and arrest him. Which, I wasn't there. I can't speak to that. I didn't see that. I don't know what they knew before, during, and after. But sometimes that is an effective thing. The problem has now left. He's not making threats to kill himself. He has not made any threats, at least at that point, to kill the police. Although later he did say, if the police come back again, I'm going to shoot them. He did say that at some point. So, could what do they think then? If we're driving down, chasing this person down around Center City, Philadelphia, going the wrong way in a one-way street, trying to get a guy who's just because he's high on PCP, the optics of that aren't going to look
very difficult.
Good either. It is a very difficult decision.
I think this is a good opportunity to take a moment and look at the clip that we're talking about. I think we have some body cam video, and if we can just take a peep, and then I'm going to ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
What's going on? Put the knife down now! Put the knife down now! Put the knife down now! 1806, step up. Male has a knife. Put the knife down now! Put the knife down now! Put the knife down now! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Back up! Back up! Back up! Back up! Man, back up! Man! Man, back up, man! Man, back up! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! No. Put the knife down! Shot fired. Stop!
I just told y'all he meant to. He's yelling.
Please back. Please just back up.
Okay. Yeah, it's a tough video to watch.
It is. Yeah, it's very difficult, and it sounds like nobody was really happy with their choices.
No.
That's what I'm struck with when I have looked at that multiple times. Multiple times. It sounds like a desperate, in my opinion, a desperate situation. The family, the people that were there, the neighbors, the law enforcement officer, hearing him, he sounded desperate. He didn't like his choices. He had to be sort of told,
Shoot him.
Yeah. Now, we are, did he have any other choices? I should just ask you because you're the professional here in this.
Well, they were not armed or supplied with tasers, those officers. Commissioner Outlaw indicated that she had asked for money to equip more and train more officers with tasers, and that had not been provided to her or to the agency. So they have some like 6,000 officers, there may be 2,000 tasers. So there's not enough tasers to go around. A baton is a close-in weapon. I don't know if they even have batons, but I certainly, as a law enforcement use of force instructor for 20 years, I would never tell an officer to close the distance, somebody with an edged weapon
Yes.
or a knife. So taser at least gives you some standoff. However, taser's not designed to be used if someone has a deadly weapon. It's used to control high-level physical force. So if that guy didn't have any weapon and he was coming after officers wanting to fight, instead of them going hands-on, it would actually be safer for them to use a taser. I've been tased. There's no
Yes.
lasting effects. And if it's effective, it can take them down, give the officers 5 seconds. It gives them 5 seconds to move in and control the person and then get them to medical attention or to jail, wherever they need to go.
Now, what do you think it is about tasers that makes them hard to get for an East Coast large metropolitan city like Philadelphia? I mean, you know, it seems like basic equipment or something. I think I can get one off of Amazon myself, or you know. Why do you think they don't have them, enough of them?
Well, as you saw, the most recent budget, they did take millions of dollars out of the police budget because the defund the police movement actually affected the Philadelphia Police Department. They defunded them. They took money out of their budget. Now, do you take it out of salaries? Do you take it out of equipment? Do you take it out of repainting police cars? I don't know which line item was touched, but I know when you have your commissioner asking for additional, less lethal weapons, and then you do not provide your commissioner with the resources to equip every officer with the best tools possible to handle all the levels of force, you're kind of setting them up for failure. So, you know, first it was defund the police because they don't deserve it or we're mad at them. Now, how come they didn't have these weapons? Well, you wouldn't buy them for us. You know, tasers are expensive and they do come with relatively expensive training. Because it's not just like we get a big box of tasers and pass them out like this. There's at least a 16-hour course that goes along with it. I'm a taser instructor. I was one of the first ones in the state of New Jersey, and our instructor level course was 40 hours just to be able to make other instructors.
Sure. Okay. How much do tasers cost? Any idea per?
A package like that would be about a $1,200 device.
Okay.
So it costs almost twice as much as the gun.
I see. Okay. Wow. Okay. All right. I hadn't thought that they were that expensive. And the whole defund the police idea, was that something that was going on before this year, or is that a brand new item? I mean, I'm just imagining that tasers would have been there a long time ago, you know, years ago. I mean, is that how did that get mixed in with the defund the police?
I know that city councils and police budgets, and they're always battling. And there's always dollars and cents. We need more here. No, you have enough. You're wasting it here and do that. There's always internal battling. Even in my agency, there was always give and take. Okay, well, I'll let you hire 3 more police cars, but you're only going to get a 1% raise, and you're going to add this much to this. And if we wanted a new weapon system, then maybe we forego getting new computers that year, or something like that. Or we could get, if we get a grant. So there's there's so many different things at play. Of why they don't do that.
Wow.
There also are some agencies that issue a pool of tasers where if they have 10 officers, but they only have 3 on the street at a time, they'll get 4 tasers, 3 to be on the street and 1 as a backup. So those officers trade off those tasers at the end of their shift. But when you have an agency the size of Philadelphia, to manage something like that is very, very difficult to do that, because officers are constantly staying somewhat past their shift just because they're so busy and so forth.
Goodness, okay. Well, yeah, you know, I'm still struck by just the feeling, hearing him saying, you know, desperately, put that down, you know, drop that, you know, and people, family members running behind him, they see a crisis situation developing here. You know, we've seen this play out before, Mr. Wallace. And just the idea that we just didn't have enough choices, and something we have to work on.
Yeah.
I think we'll have a brief break, and then we'll come back, and then I'll ask you the big question.
Okay. Thanks, Doc.
We'll see you in a moment after the break.
Supposed to keep fake smiling.
Add us on social media to watch bloopers, behind-the-scenes footage, previews, and more.
Choosing Medicare coverage can be a very confusing and complicated process. Help is just a phone call away, 856-226-4800. As a licensed insurance agent, I'll assist you in making an informed and confident decision on a Medicare plan that meets your needs, lifestyle, and budget. Call me today for a free, no obligation Medicare benefits consultation, 856-226-4800.
Boardwalks built for fun. Legendary rock and roll clubs.
This is how we do it. Hip hip hop.
Casinos by the ocean.
Hip hip hop.
Now that's New Jersey. 130 miles of beautiful beaches. Solid rock. And everything in between.
Look in the window.
Now that's New Jersey.
Burlington County College.
Is now Rowan College of Burlington County.
Still the same great faculty.
At a community college ranked top 50 in the nation.
Basically, we earn more and pay less.
RCBC students are accepted at Rowan University after graduation.
And get a bachelor's degree for around $30,000.
Online and Mount Laurel students get a 15% Rowan University tuition discount.
And have many scholarship opportunities.
So you earn more and pay even less.
Rowan College of Burlington County.
Your path to success.
They are the greatest fighting force the world has ever seen. But what does it take to strengthen our service members? What does it take to let them know that we stand behind them, wherever they are? What does it take to bridge the distance and keep them connected to family, home, and country? And what does it take to prepare them for their future when their service to the nation is complete? What does it take to strengthen our service members so they can be the greatest force for good in the world? It takes a force. Be a force behind the forces. Share a message today at force.uso.org.
Hi there. Welcome back to the Winner's Circle. I'm Dr. Sean, and you remember our partner here, Corey Jones, retired police sergeant here locally, and he's been helping us talk through Mr. Wallace case, a gentleman of 27 years who unfortunately was killed during his crisis in an intervention. I wanted to ask you about different de-escalation measures that law enforcement officers learn.
Right.
How does that work out, law enforcement officers learning de-escalation measures and what they are actually?
Yeah, so we have what's called, it used to be called a force continuum. Now it's just kind of like the levels of force that we have. So we have officer presence. You know, just me showing up in uniform is officer presence.
Yes.
And you remember a time, I remember a time, when that would be enough. Kids would be on the street corner, they would see the police car pull up, the officer would step out, put his hat on, and that would be enough. Everybody would straighten up.
Sure.
So then after officer presence, that's still part of our use of force toolbox, then we have verbal commands. You, stop. You, drop the knife. You, please come over here. Verbal commands. Then we have physical force, physical contact, which would be me grabbing your arm, putting an arm lock on you, trying to handcuff you, doing some sort of takedown. Officers are doing martial arts, jiu-jitsu, Krav Maga, and things like that. Then we would have what's called mechanical control, which would be pepper spray, canine, believe it or not, is considered mechanical control, or those batons, or those things that we hit people with or do joint locks with. That would be mechanical control.
Sure.
Then we have less lethal, which would be tasers, which would be bean bags, rubber bullets, things fired that way, less lethal. You know, that's very important that there's two phrases that people use to call that. Less lethal or non-lethal. Non-lethal means it cannot kill you. Non means non.
Right.
We don't say non, we say less lethal because there's a chance that it could be lethal. And we don't want to give people the wrong idea. And then there's obviously deadly force, which is a firearm, or any of those other tools that I told you about that is used in a way that a reasonable officer would know could cause death or serious bodily injury. So if I'm using my jiu-jitsu and I put you in a neck restraint, if I'm really good at it, there's no chance of you dying. If it's the second time I learned it and my arms are pushed the wrong way and I'm starting to crush that trachea, there's a good chance you're going to die. But if I'm trained well and I put your trachea in the safe area in the crux of my elbow, it's just going to cut off the blood flow to and from your brain, create an overpressure blood here, no fresh oxygen, and you're going to go out in 7 seconds. I've had it done to me numerous times in training with no lasting effects. You're a neurologist, maybe there are some effects to me, but I don't know. So those would be the uses of force that almost all police officers have around the country. They may call them different things. They may describe it differently, like a wheel or a continuum or a ladder.
Sure, I see that. I see the handiness of it also. So I used to do some work, some moonlighting at a psychiatric hospital, and many times people would be coming in through the emergency department and get out of control. And when somebody got out of control, we would actually call Dr. Strong overhead to the emergency department. And what that meant was really security. And security would show up strapping on gloves, coming in from all angles, but it was really the show of security guards coming from all angles that would. It really convinced me that even sometimes during psychosis, people are not as crazy as you think. It's really remarkable what physical presence in a whole bunch of people showing up strapping on gloves can mean. I wanted to understand also the verbal part of this. I mean, if I show up and I say, get on the ground, you know, I guess my voice and how I say what I'm saying has a lot to do with the response I get.
Absolutely.
And I think that you were mentioning some techniques and even some names. Did you mention Verbal Judo?
Yeah, Verbal Judo is an international company. I'm one of the few instructors. There's only 12 instructors in the whole world. In fact, yesterday we just took a national apartment and home leasing company through an 8-hour course in Verbal Judo. So it's not just for law enforcement. But to your point, to that specific thing, what we found when we were training officers, we were training them to use verbal commands to be succinct. Loud, repetitive verbal commands was the word. Loud, repetitive verbal commands. Say the same thing over and over again, very loud. Drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife. Saying it over and over and over and over again. Because we were taught, especially when dealing with people on the autism spectrum, that they can't process 2 different commands or 2 different questions at the speed that we might want them to do that in order to quell a disturbance. So we would always say, drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife. One of the things that we're now learning through Verbal Judo is we need to kind of calm the situation as best we can, even if it seems uncalmable, while being ready to defend ourselves or a third party. So maybe showing up to a scene like that with a, excuse me, Walter, can I talk to you for a second, Walter? You know, I have my officers covering me with taser, lethal force, whatever we have available. So if he decides, oh, you're somebody to attack, I'll come attack you now. We still have my life protected. And I'm not saying it'll work, because it doesn't always work. But if we train enough officers in the confidence that all the tools you have to protect yourself are working, and we will support you if you use them under the right process, not this where it is now, where every time somebody shoots somebody who has to use deadly force, their names are released and all this stuff. You can't have officers acting the way they need to act and have them afraid that they're not going to be strongly supported by their administration and by the public, So if we train the officers, excuse me, Walter, hold on for 1 second. It seems like you're upset about something that happened. Can you tell me what's going on? And those things. But that's before they get to that crisis level. But slowing down, asking open-ended questions, empathizing with the emotions that they are showing, not sympathizing, not agreeing, not supporting. If they see green monsters, you don't say, okay, I see green monsters too. But empathizing, oh, okay, well, that must be pretty scary, Walter. Can you show me where you see them, Come over here where it's safe, okay? Why don't you put that weapon down, because that might be making whatever you're seeing more aggressive, you know, and starting to empathize and do that. And this is exactly what we teach in Verbal Judo.
Open-ended questions also?
Yes, open-ended questions. So tell me what's going on today.
How about that? Okay, now I was telling my wife about our discussion today, and I promised I would ask you. I think Walter Wallace.
Over for dinner?
Certainly at some point, you know. Just got to get through this season.
Okay.
But she was wondering, why was he shot so many times? And I'm sure that many of our viewers have been asking this question also. I think it was 2 officers, 7 rounds apiece. And if I'm understanding right, 7 rounds is 7 shots per officer? Okay.
Yes.
What's the answer for why he was shot so many times?
Under stress, the statistics that I've been able to see is officers miss, they have about a 20 to 30% hit ratio.
Okay.
So when they say that officers shot 7 rounds each, at no point have I seen the police still release how many rounds he was hit by, or where he was hit by, or what his reaction was to being hit by those rounds.
Sure.
Right? So being a doctor, you're clearly aware there's certain parts of the body, when you introduce the trauma of a bullet hitting it, can cause close to immediate cessation of motor activity, which is what we're looking for when someone's charging or coming at us with a knife. Shooting accurately under stress while backing up in not ideal conditions, also making sure if you miss or if you shoot through a leg, it's not going to hit another kid that's a half a block down the street. There's a lot of factors going into why officers have to aim for center mass of the available threat. Now, there's science. There's a really good place called Force Institute by Dr. Bill Lewinsky, who's done the science, and you'll understand this, is your brain perceives a threat.
Yes.
It says, okay, sends the motor nerve signal down the hand to the, that's holding against it. There's a threat, it's right there, it aims it up, it does that fine motor skill of lining up the sights with your eyes. It says, all right, start shooting the threat. It's still a threat. Then it realizes, okay, I don't think it's a threat anymore, stop shooting. That takes time also. So in order for me now to perceive that it's no longer possibly a threat, agree with that perception, okay, yeah, I agree now, I have to make a conscious choice that it's not a threat. So unconsciously or subconsciously, my brain's saying, we think it's not a threat. Then I have to agree, yes, my life is not in danger anymore. Now I have to tell my finger to stop shooting. And that takes time.
Okay.
And we can fire, I have videos of me, I can fire 8, 9 rounds in 2 seconds. In 2 seconds, I could fire 8, 9 rounds in like 2 seconds. And I always contrast that exact example with Tom Brady.
Right.
Last season, his last throw was an interception for a touchdown. He's arguably the best quarterback that ever threw a football. Right. He came back, he saw what he thought was good, and as he was releasing that football, something bad was going on. He could not stop that throw. Just like those officers could not stop pulling that trigger. Who do you think gets more training? Tom Brady gets way more training, and he was still throwing an interception. Put the ball where it wasn't supposed to be.
Interesting.
Right? So that's the kind of the way I describe it. So it's all based in science. Perception, reaction, and then motor action.
Okay. So now, here's a big question. You know, many people have been asking and questioning, what if this had happened in a better neighborhood? There's an idea that people that are of different ethnicities, different color skin, in different neighborhoods get different treatment by not only law enforcement, but the government, by healthcare. Have you seen that play out?
I've seen the fact, in some instances, sure. Because if the healthcare system, the ambulance, is not taxed, when I say taxed, meaning they're not overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You know, the town I worked in, ambulances would get there routinely quick. Fire trucks would also come when you called for an ambulance, and a police car. So when you called 911 in my town for a medical condition, you got all 3, and we all knew each other. All 3 of those first responding groups knew each other. We'd get there and we'd work the problem together.
Sure.
Also, if you have an affluent neighborhood where houses are more spaced out, you don't have a narrow street with a bunch of cars parked on it, and then a lot of the neighborhood coming out and now interfering in this extremely volatile, extremely dangerous situation with somebody with an edged weapon, that takes your attention away. So in verbal judo, we call something, it's called SAFER. It's one of the acronyms in verbal judo, and one of those is revised priorities. Words don't work when there's revised priorities, meaning I can sit and talk to you and try to de-escalate you all day, but Safer, he violated almost all of them. People were in danger because he's running around with a knife.
Sure.
He was coming at us, so that's the A, attack. So the S was security of people or things.
Yes.
The A was attack. The F was flight. He was moving all around. Excessive repetition. They asked him to drop the knife 11 times. That's the E in safer. And then R for revised priorities. He's putting other people in danger. We're running out of places to back up
Sure,
to. So eventually we're going to have to use deadly force because words are not working. So one of the first things we teach our officers
Right.
and private companies is your safety is number one.
Yes.
So if at any time words are failing because
Right.
you have a safer violation, which Mr. Wallace violated almost all of them, that's why he was unfortunately shot. So if we were to have that same situation in a rural area, there may not be 100 people around or 5 people or 6 people standing around.
Dynamics are different.
The dynamics are different. The ability for the officers to focus on it.
Yes.
Maybe they'd be able to get and keep his attention. That person doesn't have to perform. Because remember, there's performance too.
Yeah.
He's got his family, his friends, his kids, his whatever there. He's got to perform. He can't back down to the police.
Sure. Yeah, I hear you. Wow, so, clearly not enough choices, and hopefully we can work together, understand from one another, law enforcement, healthcare, and figure out what we can do to create some more perfect solutions, more ideal solutions to the extent that everybody is happy with them. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Doc. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, one day maybe you can help me get some training too. Who knows?
I would love to.
Yeah.
And that goes both ways
Yes.
because with your experience in dealing with people in crisis,
Sure.
we could definitely work together to develop an immediate critical response plan for
We'll do
people
that.
in that situation.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. There's a skill set that I teach also called motivational interviewing, and I do it for healthcare professionals. I could certainly do that for law enforcement.
That would be great. Let's talk.
So, yeah, we'll talk.
All right, sir.
Thank you so much for joining, guys. Thank you so much for sharing also the winner circle with your friends and family. We don't always have all the best answers, but as long as we keep talking with the idea of looking for those best solutions, we'll get closer and we'll ultimately find them. Until we meet again next week, keep winning. Thanks for joining, guys.
Stay safe.